Welcome to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast from WealthManagement.com focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. I'm Diana Britton, managing editor of WealthManagement.com, and in this podcast we explore some of the struggles and personal development issues facing advisors and financial services professionals, and how to get to a place of healing for mind, body, and spirit. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Advisor podcast, and thanks for joining us. As you may know, this is the podcast focused on financial advisor health and well-being, and today's guest definitely counts on that score. His name is James Bogart, CEO, president, and founder of Bogart Wealth, a fast-growing RIA in McLean, Virginia. James, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, as a busy and often stressed out executive at one of the top RIAs in the country, James found himself adopting some pretty unhealthy habits during the last few years. Unfortunately, it's a situation, many firm leaders find themselves in. And, when he ran into some health problems, it led him to seek help, and he lost 70 pounds, completely changed his lifestyle. And he puts it this way: I was building wealth at the sacrifice of my health. Now I'm using my wealth to improve my health, which is great. But James, can you just back up a little bit and tell me, about your lifestyle before you lost the weight and made the change?
Yeah, I had this mindset of just build it, build it, build it. And, ultimately I'd say I really just didn't prioritize my own mental or physical well-being. And so we launched the RA in 2016. We were breaking away from one of the wirehouse firms. And it's a stressful endeavor. It's just mentally, physically, financially, legally. I mean, you name it, you're getting kind of pinged on all fronts. And it should have been telling even back then. I think I shared the story with you, but we ultimately changed our attire. We went from being a suit and tie kind of organization to dress shirt and dress pants organization when we launched. And the honest reason is because I had put on so much weight that I couldn't button my dress shirts anymore. And I didn't want to replace my wardrobe at a period of time when I didn't have an income. When
Yeah.
we were launching, obviously it's easy for me to say now, 7 years later, but it was some pretty bad habits even then. Now, we are fortunate to have office locations in multiple states, but unfortunately, that means a lot of travel. And I would say that when I bounce between our offices, I don't have my family with me, and my schedule is very non-standard. So it got to the point where I was either eating out with clients, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a week when I would go to Texas or Delaware or any of our other office locations. And then, all of a sudden, even on nights when I wasn't eating, it just wasn't something where I prioritize cooking at home because, if you only have 1 or 2 nights that you're going to be eating, cooking for yourself, it really isn't quote unquote cost effective. And
Mm.
so naturally by the way, that was me rationalizing it. um, not saying it was the right line of thinking, but naturally it just led to a kind of parabolic increase in weight, which has ensuing other medical issues, high blood pressure, obviously obesity and lack of energy, tiredness, migraines at the end of the day. Just so many different things were kind of slowly getting to the place. 15 to 20 Diet Cokes a day. I mean, goodness, there was a lot of bad habits that were going on all at the same time. And when it's gradual, you don't really notice it until all of a sudden it's kind of kicks you in the rear.
Mm.
So I would say it was a combination of a lot of travel, a lot of bad habits slash not prioritizing just my overall well-being. And, naturally it led to me going to the hospital.
Mm.
so 2022, summer of 2022, I had 4 hospital visits, almost back to back to back. Different things, but it's enough to say, well, something else is going on. And admittedly, I had not been to the hospital ever before in my life. So to have 4 in such a short period of time was, really that eye opener that I needed. Now, I'd say even the first two, this is, kind of maybe tells a little bit about me, but even the first 2 trips weren't enough for me to have that catalyst to make change. It was after the second that I really kind of said, all right, time to make some dramatic adjustments in life and kind of re-inventory everything that's going on. So that was first visit was July of 2022. Second visit was August, and that was what ultimately kicked me into gear to say, we got to make some serious changes. So what I ended up doing was finding and I should probably take a step back. I always have had what I've perceived as a healthy lifestyle, right? And that's, I think, part of the problem with everything that was going on is I would work out 5 6 times a week, and yet I'm still putting on weight.
Mm.
I mean, it's like, all right, well, clearly, the definition of insanity, it's like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, but I wasn't getting a different result. And so then I went through this whole gauntlet of trying to find the right professional for me. And this is before any of the hospital visits, right? But I had somebody who put me on a series of supplements. Well, next thing you know, I'm literally putting on a pound of weight every single day I was on these supplements. It lasted for 3 weeks. I put on 21 pounds. And finally I said, all right, clearly this isn't the right solution for me.
Mm.
And it's I think part of the issue I have with the medical industry in general is there's not a whole lot of cohesive discussions happening, right? Like you have a primary care person, then if you go to a hospital, you got a whole different set of doctors, and sometimes you're seeing 3 or 4 or 5 different doctors dependent upon what's going on. And there's not someone who's kind of quarterbacking that in our lives. And I think about, as an RIA owner or a financial advisor, that's what we are for our clients is, we're their quarterbacks. We're pulling everything together. And I was getting very frustrated I didn't have that. So fast forward to after the second hospital trip, and I got to give my wife a ton of credit for this, but naturally she wants me to be around. But she found me a concierge doctor here in Northern Virginia that was exactly what I was looking for.
Mm.
And that first visit with him, he goes, "Look, James, I don't normally put people on prescriptions, but we got to put you on blood pressure medication. You're going to have a heart attack."
Mm.
And I was a 155 over 105 when that happened.
Mm. Wow.
And oh, by the way, you need to get the weight off, right? So I left there with that, the scared straight kind of mindset, but it's like, all right, well, clearly what I was doing was not working, and just working out and eating whatever I want, or eating quote unquote healthily, in my opinion, was not working either. And so then he gets me introduced. So he put me on blood pressure medication, and that was one step, which albeit was a band-aid in my opinion. Then he gets me in with a nutritionist who's I don't know, they're not affiliated, but they're in the same building. And between the two of them, that was what ultimately kind of kicked it into gear for me. Admittedly, my wife was 8.5 months pregnant when all of this stuff was going on. So
Oh, wow.
you want to add on the stress. But I will say the reason that I got so adamant on getting healthy was I did not want to go to the hospital again and not be able to be there for the birth of our son.
Mm.
And so, whatever the reason or catalyst is that we all have to trigger these things, I think it's important to embrace that and own it. But for me, it was the fact that I didn't want to miss the birth of my child. And because I was afraid that if I was back in the hospital, they already told me the next trip to the hospital, I'm having surgery. Um,
Mm.
so and who knows how long you're in, right? So I was doing everything in my power to not go back to the hospital, which is what caused me to make such dramatic changes in my diet specifically. So I went all in with the nutritionist, and admittedly, that first month, just by getting the nutrition, I lost 30 pounds.
Wow.
And it's like progress ultimately is what creates habit. it also is what creates motivation. And so, very quickly I was seeing the quote unquote reward for my efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just went probably maybe a little bit too obsessive on the other side, where then I started engaging with my doctor again on all of the macros. And so now we went in and we did a whole panel of blood work on where my body was having deficiencies. As much as I might not like to believe it, but my testosterone levels were incredibly low. And
Mm-hmm.
he said this to me, and I said, "There's no way that's possible." And my wife will agree that there's no way that's possible. And he goes, "No, no, no. Males, as they get into their late 30s, early 40s, testosterone just naturally declines." He's like, "Are you losing focus at the end of the day? Are you getting headaches?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, check, check, yes, yes." He's like, "That's all testosterone. We need to get the testosterone fixed." And he didn't jump to the shots, right, which is where most of these doctors make money off of it. He's like, "Look, let's just try some oral testosterone supplements to try to see if we can get it back on track." And almost within the next 5 weeks, we did a retest on the blood work, and it's now all of a sudden it's perfectly normal, and I'm at a place where I feel great. I feel great throughout the day. I've got energy throughout the day. I'm coming home excited and happy, and so, the long long story short is, really, at the end of the day, we had great progress. We started tweaking the mix. I believe the body's a chemistry set, and being just mindful of that. And each of us has different compositions that we need to just tweak to be able to get the mix right. And I've become a very big disciple of several of these motivational coaches. Brendan Bouchard's one of the ones I like the most, and he has this acronym he uses. It calls Meds RX, and I heard it literally October of 2022 when all of this stuff was going on. And as soon as he said it, I'm like, that totally resonates with me. And so Meds RX, and again, I'm not taking credit for it, it's Brendan Burchard's, but stands for meditation, exercise, diet, sleep, relationships, and supplements. And that
Mm-hmm.
became my mantra. Just all in on it. I had been doing a lot of those things and getting frustrated that I wasn't getting the results. But as you start seeing the progress happening, you get even more compulsive about it. um
Mm-hmm.
and I've gotten even better results. And the hardest part too, especially with I'd say weight loss, is you just naturally hit these plateaus where you don't get progress. And that, to me, is where you mentally get so tested.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if I'm not getting the progress on the weight loss, why am I doing it? Why don't I just
Why
go
do I
right back
continue?
to, yeah, exactly, back to my old habits? And that's why you see those the slippages that people naturally have. And kind of going back to the original part, I told the doctor when I engaged him, the concierge doctor, when I engaged him, I said, "My number one goal for changing my life is to be able to walk my daughters down the aisle." And I genuinely felt, here I was, and I was 37 years old, by the way, but I genuinely felt that I was not on track to be able to do that. My daughters at the time were 5 and 4. Now, I mean, I'm empowered. I have control. I am, dare I say, making good decisions, which really is becoming just inspirational for a lot of other people. I see some of the people in our office. I've seen good friends of mine. I actually had a friend of mine yesterday who's had some medical issues, and he sought after me to say, "What did you do to make such a transformation in your life?" Because I went from, I mean, 70 pounds is it's a 33% weight loss. It was just a lot,
Mm.
and I'm not going to say I'm perfect by any means, but I definitely have more I want to do in terms of my physical well-being. But it's been a very rateable change.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that you said that mindfulness was something that really helped you along the way. And I just a little bit of background about mindfulness. Mindfulness, which has its roots in Buddhist meditation, means maintaining a moment by moment awareness of our thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and surrounding environment through a gentle, nurturing lens. Also, it involves acceptance, meaning that we don't, meaning that we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings without judging them. without believing, for instance, that there's a right or a wrong way to think or feel in any given moment. And, when we practice mindfulness, our thoughts tune into what we're sensing in the present moment rather than rehashing the past or imagining the future. That's just some background from Greater Good magazine. But how did mindfulness kind of play into your journey, James?
Well, I was touching on it a few minutes ago, right? I mean, you naturally have these plateaus, and doesn't necessarily mean weight loss or nutrition. It could just be any type of self-improvement or goal, et cetera, that you're just not seeing that progress. And it's so easy to go back into that old mindset slash habit slash destructiveness, and like recently, a great example. My kids with Halloween, it's all the candies, it's the treats, it's the
Yeah.
cookies. And it's so easy to just, oh, I'll have a quarter of a cookie, or I'll have half of a donut, or I'll have a, Snickers or a Reese's bar. And then next thing you know, it's you have one, you has, three, you have four, you have five, and boom, it's like you've totally disrupted. And by the way, I'm not saying indulging occasionally is not appropriate, but I have the type of personality that regrettably it's I'm either all in or I'm all out. And so because of that, I have to have my triggers that are constantly bringing me back to the mindset slash state of mind that I'm trying to be in or want to be in. And so another one that I stole is either from Ed Millett or Brendan Bouchard, but it's this doorway trigger exercise where literally every key doorway in my life, I have three words that I have printed. I mean, it's just so simple, but it's printed and taped right to the doorway to just trigger my mindset when I go into that setting. And so, for example, with home, it's to be present, it's to be happy, it's to be engaged, it's to be affectionate. Like a lot of people, and I'm not, I'm not going to bundle myself with anyone else, but I mean, my phone's a third appendage for me.
Mm,
I am always on my phone. Clients, they love the responsiveness, but at the same time too, I have to unplug. And I was a terrible habit, but my kids got used to the fact that my phone was a higher priority to them than they were.
mm,
And that was one where I go back to these trigger events. It's like, all right, now, and this is a change that I made in the last year, is now I put it down. And especially when I'm coming home from work and I only have maybe an hour with them before they go to bed, it's that phone's nowhere near my presence. And simply for the exact reason that when and this is my perception, but with my kids, they feel that when my phone is in my hand or on the table near them, that phone is more important than they are. And just by putting it in my office, and I use it as the excuse that that's the time to charge it, right? Put it in my office away from them so that I can focus on them for however long it is that I get their attention. That's just one of the examples with mindfulness. Now, I do the same thing at work, right? It's my triggers here when I walk through the doorway, it's focus, discipline, and direct. That's just the mindset that I want to be in when I'm in the office. I have the same ones in the morning, and then I even have a daily dashboard that I review simply to remind me of the goals, the things that I'm working towards, why I'm doing what I'm doing. And, because some of those things, you need those reminders. I mean, I love Simon Sinek's, whole conversation about why and needing to start with why. I'll admit I've had a period of time over the last, couple of years where I question my why. Why do I do what I do? And, obviously fulfillment and the impact we have with our clients and our staff, et cetera. But sometimes that's not enough, especially when you're going through the real hard stuff. And,
mm,
and we've gone through a really hard market environment this last year, but in 2022, this year's not been a whole lot easier. And so I know a lot of owners are going through, difficult decisions and, questioning their purpose, questioning why they're doing what they're doing. And I think the reality of it is that when you are in a position of influence and you're leading people, I don't think our staff understands the pressure that comes with that,
mhm.
because it's not like we get to leave the office and it goes away. It doesn't. I don't know a business owner out there that doesn't lay in bed at some point in the night thinking about something related to their business. And this is every industry, not just financial services, but it's like, the other night I'm up at 4:45 and I'm like, all right, I had, a whole series of things that I was thinking about related to an expansion that we're doing. And, and that's just normal, right? And it comes back to needing to learn mentally how to process that stuff so that it's not uh, detrimentally impacting any other part of your life. And
Mm,
and for me, you want to talk about the old James versus the current James. I used to let that stuff be cancer. It would pull me down. It would be the rationalization that I needed to be able to justify why I was going to have that bowl of ice cream at the end of the night, why, I was going to have the lobster mac and cheese when I was out at dinner. And for me, food was a coping mechanism for sure. But those are the things that, yes, you can indulge in that stuff from time to time, but when you're doing it every single day, 4 or 5 times a day, no, you're not going to be healthy.
yeah. How has this lifestyle change affected your business? I mean, because I guess when you were talking to me about, having to spend more time on yourself, diet and exercise and cooking and your mental health, working on that. You think that would take you away from the business, but how has it
Yeah,
been affecting
no,
the business?
actually quite the contrary. So part of it is so the biggest change that I made with regards to nutrition was meal prep and doing all of my own cooking. And so specifically like lunches, I come in every day for lunch. I come in every day with lunch now and my snacks throughout the day. But like I used to either go out and get something for lunch or I'd have something delivered for lunch. And obviously you can't have the quote unquote regularity of your time. Now with having my lunch prepared and I just bring it in the office, takes me maybe 2 minutes to heat it up. I'm it's back on my time as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to ambiguity associated with when I would otherwise eat. Truthfully, the health, the physical health side, I always did prior to any of this change. I would work out anywhere from 5 to 6 days a week, whether it was weightlifting, cardio, meditation, yoga, etc. But I would always do that. That wasn't a change, and I usually always do that first thing in the morning. It's part of my just morning routine. But the food side of things, the biggest change was I stopped doing the client dinners.
Mm,
And it is not anything against these restaurants. The food's delicious, but you can't control your intake at that point as well. Whereas when you cook your own food, you know exactly what's on it and what's in it, how it's been prepared, etc. So that was probably the biggest change. And I would also say related to that was this mindfulness exercise of I do need my decompression time. And part of the problem was is I'd go down to, for example, to Texas, no wife, no kids, and I would literally just work 12 to 14, sometimes 16 hours in a day, just nonstop, back to back to back to back to back. And mentally that's just exhausting. I mean, and I almost got to this place where Texas had this negative connotation to me
mm,
because I would go down there and I would just be working so hard and I wouldn't have any time to relax, decompress, personal fulfillment, whatever. I would still work out, right? But I would be just working nonstop. So the biggest changes that I've made in this last year has been much more restrictive and diligent about my time, having my personal time. And ironically, with it, clients respect it. And part of it too with the growth is, clients had my cell phone, they would call me, they would text me, whatever. And not having those proverbial boundaries, naturally from a compliance perspective, I had to migrate some of those things away from personal use devices anyways. But all of a sudden it's like I put up these boundaries and I become so much more effective and efficient when I'm actually engaged and working than what I was doing before, where I was kind of partially working for a lot longer period of time.
mm,
And related to that is some of the mindfulness, right? So if like I say, these are the 6 hours in a day that I'm going to be doing meetings, that is the 6 hours that I am completely turned on. Uh,
yeah. Hmm.
as opposed to, I'm going to try to piece these things in throughout the day. And then, oh, after the kids go to bed, I'm going to do some more work. But because of it, the business, and it doesn't totally surprise me. I mean, we went from 680 million in 2020 to 2.6 billion in assets now. So 3 years, huge growth. But it doesn't surprise me that we actually continued to grow. I mean, we had a 25% growth year in 2022 when most firms in the industry were down 15%. But it was because of the fact that I think we got a lot more disciplined in what we were doing. And one of the mantras I use internally, my team all knows it, is direct intent. Everything has to be done with direct intent. You're doing things for a purpose, not just because it's something that you're being told to do, but there's an ultimate goal and objective as to why you're doing it. And so this whole concept of direct intent, specific actions, being very diligent, and frankly, I got to put it on some of my team members having that impact on me, right? Because we had staff that said that I want to be an advisor, but I don't want to be James. Right? They saw what
Hmm.
I was doing and how unhealthy it was. And sure, I was able to sustain it for a period of time. And arguably, I mean, my ego would probably tell you I could still sustain it if I wanted to, but it wasn't the right track. It wasn't what was ultimately going to fulfill my bigger goals in life. And again, walking my daughters down the aisle is unquestionably one of my biggest goals. Um,
Yeah.
and being around, right? Being able to do that, and you mentioned that comment that I had said, but I had doctors as I was going through this process of kind of discovering it's like, look, you have spent all of this time focusing on wealth creation and building, what is a phenomenal enterprise, but it was at the sacrifice of my health.
Hmm.
And there's no doubt. I mean, I have colleagues, I won't name them by names, but builds phenomenal RIA firms, and then at 42 years old, they die. And
Hmm.
it's like, all right, well, that's not the path I want. Like everyone else in my life it will enjoy the fruit of the labor, but I'm not going to be around to enjoy it. And truly, I felt like that was the path I was on. So, that's what ultimately kicked me into gear to, kind of start this new endeavor. But back to the original question of did it impact the business? I would actually argue for the better because we're more focused, more direct, and really more driven.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that you tried to make it an internal goal at Bogart Wealth to focus on health and wellness. And what has been the response there?
It's mixed, honestly, right? We've got, I think at the end of the day, in order for people to really want to focus and prioritize health and wellness, they have to want it. You
Yeah.
have to want it yourself. I mean, we live in a society where you're constantly inundated with call it distractions, right? Whether it be social media, whether it be the media itself, news, etc. I mean, there is a science behind advertising, right? And that science is typically with the intention of selling you something. And a lot of the times the things that are the most delicious and most indulgent are things that are not good for you, and habitually, right? Whether it be sugars, whether it's processed foods, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, booze. I mean everything, right? It's just long term, and anything in excess is not going to be good for you. Now,
Yeah.
when it comes to my team and kind of indoctrination there, I would say mixed intent, right? Like I do have a very bad habit of going all in on things. um, and I'm all in. I'm still all in. But but I would say, some of the exercises were impactful. Like for example, we did a step challenge. We've done overall fitness challenges. We did a weight loss challenge. Those all, definitely were jumped in for by my team. But at the same time too, I see, you get rid of those challenges and some of those bad habits just come right back in. And that's where the mindfulness becomes so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so difficult too in just this society because a lot of the social interactions that we have with people and, hanging out with friends and seeing family involves like food, right? And drinking. And so it's really hard to, keep on track with, eating healthy when that's kind of like just built into our society. Um, how do
Well,
you
and
think?
I love that you said that because I'll tell you, when I stopped drinking, it felt very isolating.
Mm,
And And by the way, I stopped drinking before any of this health stuff. And it's nothing other than I felt that I needed to be focused, and alcohol was something that slows me down. And so I don't like to drink it very much. Now, I'm not saying I don't enjoy a beer or a glass of wine, but when all of a sudden you're in a social setting and not drinking, you find that you start getting invited to less and less and less.
Mm,
And that carries with it a mindfulness. And by the way, my wife goes through the exact same thing, because we both have these places in life where we feel that it's been isolating because of the fact that we don't continue to partake in that.
yeah.
And that's why when I come back to the mindfulness stuff and specifically my goals, I have to constantly just, again, the media, their job is to inundate us with whatever the agenda is that they're selling. Uh, at the same time too, I'm doing the same thing to myself with my own goals, things that are important to me. And that's why, like, for example, I talk about this one-page sheet. I literally have it right here sitting next to me at my office. I've got it on my mirror at home. I've got it on my nightstand. So I mean, it's constantly in a place where I am reminding myself of what it is that I'm actually working for and why I'm doing it.
That's great. Um, yeah, I mean, it's so simple, but it's, we really need those reminders because we just don't think about those things throughout the
Well,
day.
but you're spot on with social pressures. I mean, the social
Yeah.
pressures are even worse. And again, I'll use the buddy of mine who I was talking to yesterday, and he's like, I think I need to give up drinking. And I said, do you want to? Like, what's more important to you? And he just had heart surgery. And I said to him, what's more important to you? Continuing to have the lifestyle that you're having right now, which albeit might be very fun, but short-lived, because now you're
Hmm.
seeing the physical decay that's happening, or are you wanting to be around and continue to enjoy life for a much longer period of time? And what was interesting was he said he felt like he needed to replace it with something else. And and I said, I don't disagree with that, but make sure that you're replacing it with something that's healthy and constructive, right?
Hmm.
Like if you're trying to give up alcohol, you're gonna have a void, especially. I'm not gonna say he over consumes, but it's part of his
He
life,
enjoys his
yeah,
drink.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But 5, 6 days a week enjoys his drink, right?
Hmm.
And I said, you're gonna have a void, but replacing it with tobacco is not a good. He was thinking about picking up cigars. I said,
Oh.
replacing it with another vice is not exactly constructive. I would say you really do need to find a healthy replacement, whether it be going for a walk. Andy Frisella does his 75 hard, which it's interesting, right? Everybody thinks that's a fitness program. It is not a fitness program. It is a mental test. And for anybody who hasn't done a 75 hard, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's one where you can see how difficult it is to follow that regiment for a 75-day period of time. And it's not just food or exercise. It's things like you got to read 10 pages in a story every day. You got to take a selfie every day. You got to other things that are mentally stimulating and engaging. But that's the hardest part about what his program has to do. And I think it's fantastic for that reason.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid we're just about out of time. I mean, James, I feel like I could hear you talk all day. And this stuff is just so great. I'd like to thank my guest, James Bogart, for being on the podcast and sharing your story with me, James. Thank you
I,
so
I
much.
appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's so great because there are so many, RIA executives and leaders out there that are going through the same struggles as you, and I think thank you for sharing it with us. And I hope that folks can, take away some of the learnings that you've had and take that back to their organizations. If you'd like to reach out to James, if you have any questions for him, you can reach him at jbogart@bogartwealth.com. And if you have a struggle yourself and you wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at diana.britton@informa.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of WealthManagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your particular situation.